All right. Let's talk about the other big TV event this week, Bob. Arrested Development dropped. How many episodes have you
Oh,
seen?
I've seen four, and I've made Facebook comments after seeing three.
I'm up to 9, and I'm
Okay.
honestly kind of slogging through them. Where does they end up coming together somewhat by the end, but still not necessarily in the best way possible, but in a good way, I guess. I'm just trying to read some reviews and make my way through them. And I'm sure we'll talk about Arrested Development at least once more, maybe multiple times more. But for now, let's just give our first impressions. So, before I get your impressions of these, you've sort of hinted, but let me ask: were you a fan of Arrested Development the first 3 seasons?
I was late to the party, so I did watch them like as a this is even before streaming, but it was kind of a DVD binge. Went through all three seasons really fast. Especially the first two were fantastic. The third one sort of it wasn't a letdown, but it just wasn't quite at the same level as the first two. And now here we are with the fourth, and spoiler alert, it's lower than the third by quite a bit.
Lower than the third by quite a bit. Okay, well let's talk about your impressions after the first 4 episodes? Did you say?
Yeah, four episodes. Now, it's funny because I commented on Facebook. I've only seen three, but is this like a Star Wars sort of deal where it's coveted and then it comes back and it's like the same people, but you're kind of torn because you want to like it, but it's just really not as good. Um, that's how I
Uh,
feel. Maybe not as extreme, but I don't know.
yeah, well, I mean, I have a theory that's actually not too far from yours. Um, and that theory is that because of the circumstances of Arrested Development's original run, um, we tend to remember it as better than it was, maybe. I mean, don't get me wrong, at times it could be a truly great show. The way it developed a joke, its hyper conscious cleverness, the comedic risk taking, its recurring punchlines. But there were some things about the original greatness that can't easily be recreated. Um, for one, I mean, they got just the obstacles. It was hard to get the cast all the way together, and so that just made some things not work. And also, the length is a little bit too long. I think they vary from 28 to 37 minutes, and I think they would have benefited most of them from being shrunk down to a normal 20, 20 plus minutes. But here's the controversial part, Bob.
Okay, let's hear it. Controversy.
Um, you said that you came late to Arrested Development.
Yep.
I came slightly late myself. It was sort of a fringe show when it aired, but I think that made it better to the people who did love it in real time. An underappreciated show always gets bonus love, if you know what I mean. So the TV hipsters who were watching before it was cool were like this little club. Do you remember the very first pop culture blog we ever wrote for in like 2004, 2005? Cool Tour de Blog.
Yes, I do remember that.
Well, I remember the few people who were watching the show when it aired would always throw around these lines that made no sense at all to me. It'd be like, "No touching," or "Steve Holt," um, but it made me just crack up talking about it. It was like this little club of this little cult of Arrested Development. But now it's pretty popular, and it's actually overhyped, if anything, I would say.
Yeah, your theory is way more nuanced and thought through. Mine was a lot more straightforward, and it was just one of your points. But I think it's the largest point, and I think it's the way that they're filming this with the whole one character at a time approach. I just don't
Mm.
think it's working. The formula was always the whole family and Michael, the main character's interactions with all of them almost every episode, and they're all sitting around half the time, and it's funny to see rich people dealing with their rich people problems. And now it's like each episode is like, hey, it's Michael's Arrested Development, it's Lindsay's Arrested Development, and the whole episode revolves around one character who was never funny or meant to be funny in isolation. And I think that's the true breakdown is they're half-assing this whole production. They're like, oh, if we get everyone together just enough so that we can make some token, scenes where other people show up in the episode, but it's all new people and just one character. Man, it just shows how important the full ensemble cast really is. That's my theory anyway.
That makes a lot of sense. Because I think you're right. It's very ensemble based originally. The way they're doing it now, it's like everyone's the star of their own little mini episode, or one episode, but only mini series.
Yeah.
Um, and you talk about half-assing it. I've heard that the idea for Mitch Hurwitz was always to make the movie. He really wants to make the movie, and then this episode was just to sort of tell the backstory, so everyone's caught up for the movie he wants to make. So I've heard some speculation that he actually was half-assing this, saving his better ideas for a potential movie that may or may not ever come.
Yeah, okay, so that makes sense. Then that My theory holds true, even with that second piece of information. I like that, or knowing that anyway, because it validates the whole thing, the whole problem for me. I'm just not really enjoying it. So, I I thought the first episode was okay. So these aren't spoilers. I'm just going to say quickly because it's just 4 episodes. First episode was Michael and his son, and those were really the only two characters. The second episode was uh, the George Senior. Jeffrey. What's that actor's name? Jeffrey
Jeffrey
Tambor.
Tambor. Oh, but
Yeah.
let me just cut in way too much George Senior so far.
Oh yeah, so far way yeah yeah. And the second episode was totally about him, and it was overkill. That one I fell asleep during, and the third episode was all about Lindsay, and I was just distracted by her new face, which is kind of all the buzz on the internets. I don't know what's going on there. If that's a subtle
Well,
uh,
everyone's like 7 years older, you know.
yeah, but she looks it, or there's some theories that people are like, well, it could be that the creators they always thought her character would play around with plastic surgery, and maybe they're just subtly messing with her in post production, and then they're going to do a reveal that she got plastic surgery later. And I'm like, that's an
Mm.
elaborate story to cover up somebody just doesn't look as attractive 7 years later. So sorry to say, I don't know,
All
but
right.
she looks way different by comparison. Everyone else about the same. Anyway, the
Yeah,
third,
surprisingly the same for a lot of the people, except Michael
yeah,
Cera, who's this lanky college kid now, but that's
right.
to be expected.
What else did I want to say? The third and fourth episode, I can't even remember what I wanted to say. It's that interesting. Let me just say that after watching three, I was kind of disappointed, and then I had multiple people on Facebook come to me and say, "Oh, stick with it. It gets better after the first three." And I'm like, there is no way that this is just randomly that I'm commenting after the three where it's bad and it right before it picks up. It just felt like a little, people are just defending it for defending, sake. Because then I watched the fourth one, and in their defense, it was slightly better than the third one, but I don't think the whole series is going to pick up as a result of this.
Yeah, the best I've heard, again trying to be unspoiled, is that it's impressive the way it ties together all the plot lines by the end. And like, oh wow, that was masterfully done. Some people say that, but most people seem to agree. Most critics, at least, that it's uneven in the way that at times it shows its old brilliance, but at times it just is terrible. And so one of those medium ratings where it's both good and bad instead of just medium good.
Right, and it's a benefit of the doubt good because it's literally like 2 minutes out of 30 is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And anyway,
Yeah. Anything you do like about it?
I do love the quirkiness of the characters. It's over narrated, but I did like the narration, which is another problem. It feels like there's more narration than even before.
Hmm.
But
Ron Howard is really the star of this. Have you gotten to any of the Ron Howard episodes? I can't remember when
yeah,
they start coming in.
yeah. That's episode 4 when he comes in. I really like Isla Fisher, and she's the love interest for Michael, and she
Hmm.
comes in episode 4 as well. She's fun. I feel like
Cool.
I'm reaching here though. I'm
Let me see what I wrote down. What about the cameos, like Kristen Wiig and Seth Rogen as the young Bluths?
they were funny at first, but now they're just stupid funny. I don't know what to say. They're not that clever.
Yeah, the joke is that it's those two actors. So you see them. Oh, that's the joke, but we've already seen the joke that it's those two actors. Next.
Right. Yeah.
What else do I have here? Um, I don't know if this is damning with faint praise, but I like that it feels a lot like the original show. Just like the pacing, the narration feels the same, and even like the little music medley at the end of each episode, where it goes from like the Arrested Development to the Imagine to the Fox. Like sounds exactly the same as before. And I'm
yeah,
like, oh,
there's
these are
some
the same.
there's some nostalgia there. I guess that's fun, but uh, by the way, this failed the wifo meter. I'm watching this by myself now after three
Oh,
episodes. It's just for the show, so I'm doing this for the peeps
for the
out there.
people. Wow,
Yeah.
that's dedication. Did you like the first 3 seasons?
Yeah, we watched them all together on that DVD binge fest a few years back. But this fourth one, after 3 episodes, and we both fell asleep kind of on the third one. Um, I'm all alone here.
Mm, doing it for the art, for the craft. Wow.
That's
Okay.
right.
Well, um, Well, let me ask you this then. The one more thing that I feel is pretty interesting. So this is the second major Netflix release of original content, Bob,
Yeah.
after House of Cards. What do you think of this all-at-once streaming distribution model now that we've got a second data point here?
Uh, I think it's weird because we've talked about how you're not on the same page with anyone. You're all watching it at your own pace. You can't talk about it week to week. The water cooler,
Right.
proverbial water cooler chatter is all sorts of messed up. Um, and you also kind of have a sense of of procrastination. I mean, it's not like a real problem in life to be like,
Mm.
oh, I got to get around to watching the TV that everyone's watching. But you sort of get that feeling a little bit like you're behind, even though you haven't started. I don't know that I like it, but I think it's here to stay, and I don't know. It's probably going to be fine.
You will learn to live with it. One of the
Yeah.
things that was potentially interesting was that Mitch Hurwitz was trying to play around with this new format by making it so you could watch the episodes in any order. But it turned out that he's like, no, that would have been way too hard. So watch them in the right order, please. And that would have
That's
been an
funny.
interesting way to take advantage of this new content delivery system.
He says that, but of the first four episodes, especially the first three, you could watch them in any order. It doesn't really matter. You don't care about anything, or nothing ties together very well.
So I it hasn't been interesting enough for me to take detailed notes, sort of like what you're saying. But I feel like the first 3 or 4 episodes, it says like the exact same story, but from each different person's point of view. Then I feel like at 4 or 5, we start to get like the next phase of the story at least. So I feel like that aspect does go away after the first few. It starts becoming
Yeah,
the right
and
orders there.
here's one disclaimer I feel like giving. I didn't rewatch the first three seasons in preparation for this fourth one, and maybe that would have helped, or that's the way to do it because it's been like 5 years
Hmm.
since I watched them, and that was even late to the party, and I still don't remember that much. So like they just jump right back in with all these plot lines of who's in jail and who's in what court case, and frankly, I could care less. Like it, there's no it's such low stakes, like you just don't care, you don't care about anything happening to any character, and Lindsay goes to India, and I don't know, there's just stuff happens randomly, there's just no rhyme or reason, it's just kind of a random reason to get these familiar faces on the screen. That's part of why it's not working for me. Is I used to care about the progression of the story and the characters and the development, but now it just feels like a hodgepodge of throwbacks and uninteresting story.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, you have that problem a little bit when it's just like been 9 months since the last time you watched this series. Like, oh, what's going on again? Like we did that with Shannon, where we had to get all the way ready for Game of Thrones. But now it's been up to 7 years potentially
Right.
since the last time you watched these people. They could do a little bit more to help bridge that gap.
Exactly.
All right, are you leaning toward a rating yet?
I'm oscillating between 2 and 3 stars, man. This is this is pretty harsh for by Bob's
Yeah, it
standards.
is.
It
Yeah,
might
it
get the
is.
token 3 star, it didn't waste my time if it picks up a little bit and people are actually accurate and it gets better after the first three episodes. But if it stays anywhere in this vicinity, it's going to be closer to a 2 star. Maybe I'll give it a 2.5 token, like uh, right in the middle there. I don't know.
You need to exercise that 2.5 slot now that you've
That's
got it.
right.
I'm aiming toward about 3, somewhere in that range, but we'll see.
Yeah.
All right.